Man with the gold gun tries to incorporate some of that.
He tries. Mm-hmm.
Welcome to Gold, Diamonds, and Death, a James Bond podcast. I am your 00 host, Jonathan Watkins. I am a writer for all things under the Cinemasins brand name and a co-host of the Behind the Scenes podcast. Joining me each and every week for this endeavor, he's the co-founder of Cinemasins and co-host of the weekly podcast Recotopia, and has a third nipple. A lot of people didn't know that.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I had a fourth one surgically removed.
And one of my good friends, of course, we were talking about Mr. Chris Atkinson. How are you today?
I'm doing all right, man.
You ready to talk about some golden guns?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let's start talking about these golden guns, and we will get behind the scenes in a segment we like to call Eon Flux.
This is a journey.
I'm gonna make a movie!
We have to go back, Kate.
Wow, how did you know all that stuff?
I did my research.
I don't understand any of this.
What the fuck is going on?
We're going to scour through the history of Eon Productions, give you all the highs and lows that went into the making of these films. Real quick, before I get into this, I get a lot of my information from online, but I also have been reading this book called Nobody Does It Better by Mark A. Altman and Edward Gross. Highly recommend that if anyone is interested in, just knowing every single thing that happened with the makings of these movies. This is the 9th film in the official franchise. It's the second with Roger Moore as Bond. Well, I said that as if he's in another Bond movie playing somebody else. No, this is the second Roger Moore movie in the franchise.
He played Goldfinger in Goldfinger.
Yeah,
you didn't know that. Yeah, weird.
Exactly. By the way, there's a weird rumor about Maud Adams that, because, she shows back up in Octopussy as Octopussy. But there was this weird rumor for the longest time that people swore they saw her in a scene in A View to a Kill. Everybody behind the scenes says that's not true, but maybe when we get to that, I'll try to remember what that scene is and we can look for it.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is also marks the 4th and final film in the series, directed by Guy Hamilton. So he's back. This is his last foray into Bond, where he's yet again kind of trying to remake Goldfinger, I would argue. Script was written by Tom Mankiewicz is back, but they did eventually bring Richard Maibaum back, so we got some Maibaum in the house on this one. When this was being made, it was the 1973 energy crisis was like the big news story, and so that's why they actually ended up using that as a backdrop for a theme in the film, also a MacGuffin in the film, which we'll get into. The other thing, which I had forgotten about this, because we were talking about last week how Live and Let Die did kind of dive into some of the blaxploitation areas, which was another popular type of film was martial art films. And Man with the Gold Gun tries to incorporate some of that.
He tries.
I would never ever think of this as a martial arts film, but there is a scene where Roger Moore has to use martial arts to fight off people.
Very unconvincingly beats up a guy way better than him at martial arts. Yes.
So anyways, yeah, we're to martial arts films. Martial arts films, younger people because I think at least through the mid 80s, that was pretty big. Because in the 80s, it definitely incorporated itself into American movies. You had stuff like The Karate Kid and The Last Dragon.
But in the 70s, you've got Bruce Lee going and a host of other films that did not even make it here, but were just huge in other parts of the world. So the martial arts movies were going crazy at this point. And we even talked about that in You Only Live Twice. So when they brought in the dojo or whatever in that one, martial arts movies weren't big then. And we even kind of wondered if maybe the Bond movies kind of I remember weirdly kickstarted it all.
Because that was interesting to me, because that wasn't something, maybe there were some being made overseas, but they definitely weren't as prominent. Beginning of the 70s, you've got Fist of Fury and Enter the Dragon.
Yeah, but even in the Wikipedia search where you put in martial arts as the genre keyword, there wasn't very many anywhere else in the world either around that time. So it was kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so they definitely dive into that, and it's not great, but we'll talk about that later, I guess. The film was shot, though, overseas in a lot of places like Thailand, Hong Kong, Macau. This would be the last co-production with Broccoli and Harry Saltzman. Saltzman had some financial issues, and so he sold his 50% in the company after this film was released. That also ends up kind of interfering with the production of the next film. This one was already in production, and he so you actually get one of the shortest gaps between Bond films with Live and Let Die and Man with the Golden Gun. I think
one of the longer ones, right? You meant?
Well, Live and Let Die and Man with the Golden Gun, there's only like 13 months or something, because Live and Let Die came out in 73. Man with the Golden Gun comes out at the end of 74.
I thought you said Spy Who. Sorry. I thought you said Spy Who Loved Me for some reason.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Got my titles mixed up.
No, you're fine. Yeah, I was gonna get to that, but I was thinking I think Dr. No One from Russia with Love is pretty close to that, but it's one of the shortest gaps. But then you have, as of this time, the longest gap. After Man with the Golden Gun is made, Spy Who Loved Me doesn't come out for 3 whole years, which we would totally love that now, because now it's like every 8 years we get one. But back then it was every 2. It was 1.5 or 2 years, and you had a new. I mean, from 62 to 74, there's 9 Bond films, in 12 years or whatever. It's crazy. It's like the Friday the 13th films in the 80s. But then we do get a bit of a gap after this because of I think some of it had to do with Maybomb. I think some of the stuff did still have to do, because I think they were trying to, we'll get into that. We talk about Spy Who Loved Me, but I think they were trying to get Blofeld back in this, or Spectre, just all that kind of stuff was going on. And so there was a bit of a gap, but that's more for next week, but I thought it was worth mentioning. And the fact that it was the last co-production with Saltzman. So yeah, let's talk about the cast. Obviously we got Roger Moore. Christopher Lee plays the villain. He was Ian Fleming's step cousin, and I guess we did talk about this in Dr. No, that I think we did. If not, Fleming really wanted Christopher Lee to play Dr. No, so his name's kind of been around the movies since back then. Lee, if you guys, I would think most people now, younger people, probably know him from Star Wars prequels. He was Dooku, right?
Lord of the Rings.
And Lord of the Rings. Was he Sauron?
He was Saruman.
Saruman. Sorry, yeah, guys, I'm not like a Lord of the Rings expert at all. Like, and by that I mean I know nothing. I watched the movies when they came out, but I know him. I don't know how much you really watched him when you were younger, but like I wasn't young when I started watching these, but the Hammer horror films.
Yeah, I think I've seen one Lee Hammer vampire film, and it may not have been one of the better ones either. But I do know that in the behind the scenes, I think it was either Saltzman or Broccoli said, "I'm tired of seeing you play Dracula all the time. Let's play this. Let's play this role."
I think it's so cool though. Now he didn't play these characters. He played Dracula. Like I can't remember. It's like 8 or I think of the Hammer Dracula films. He's not in one of them. I know he's not in Brides of Dracula. But I think he's in all the other ones. There's like 8 maybe. I don't know. I've seen them all, with the exception, oddly enough, he makes one around this time called Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. I actually own this, but I just haven't watched it. And that is a kung fu movie with vampires. It was the last of the Hammer Dracula series. But anyways, yeah, no, he's great. He's Dracula. He also played the Mummy in the first Hammer Mummy film. He also played Frankenstein's monster in Curse of Frankenstein, which might be my favorite Hammer film. They really get Frankenstein right. Like the Frankenstein movies in that cycle are so much fun. But those are also some of the better ones in Universal, so maybe it's just something about that character. He was also in The Wicker Man, which was the year before this. With
Britt Eklund, who's also in this movie. There was a funny thing that a friend of all things Sins, his name's Patrick, sent to me a while back, and it showed a side by side. It says a spy on one side of the it says Roger Moore, on the right a policeman from Wicker Man. On the left it says, and on both of them on the next row it says goes to a remote and mysterious island. Down below that where he's seduced by Britt Eklund. And then underneath, and a villainous Christopher Lee tries to harness the power of the sun. In both of those movies.
I did not think about it that much detail. It's been a couple years since I watched Wicker Man, but and we're not talking about the Nicolas Cage one.
It's very true. It's extremely true. It's not. You're not stretching. That's the great thing about that one. You're not stretching.
I finally watched the Nicolas Cage Wicker Man like maybe a year ago, because we actually talked. It was an older Sins video that was being brought up in the newsletter. Also, go to cinemasins.com and sign up for the newsletter. It's really cool. But so I watched it because we were going to talk about it on Behind the Scenes, and I hadn't seen it, and it's terrible. But it's also kind of amazing. But I wish they should have brought Britt Eklund back. Just to have her do that scene where she's pounding on the walls and dancing,
seducing the policeman.
I think she still could have pulled it off in 2006
I think so, too.
or whatever that was. She is still alive, isn't she? I feel really bad. Yeah, that's right.
She is. She's 80.
So anyway, let's talk about Britt Eckhardt. Oh, real quick on the Christopher Lee thing.
Britt Eklund.
You
said Britt Eckhardt.
Aaron Eckhart. Yeah.
Britt Eklund.
No, but first though. Before I get to Britt Eklund, Jack Palance was originally offered the role of Scaramanga. We haven't even said his name. This movie has badass elements that I love. The name Scaramanga is one of my favorite villain names.
Yeah,
and Christopher Lee's quite good in this movie. But Britt Eklund plays Mary Goodnight. Eklund, we already mentioned she was also in The Wicker Man. Also married for a time to Peter Sellers, who we talked about in Casino Royale.
Yeah.
The 1967 Casino Royale.
Yep. Had a kid with him in the 60s and was married to someone else by the time this movie came out.
So we got Britt Eklund, and we just mentioned the things of her. And so, she plays Mary Goodnight, which is it's a very controversial role in a lot of ways when you look at what people say about the film. I'm kind of in the middle, I think, but we can talk about that more in the review. Maud Adams is she plays Andrea Anders, which is Scaramanga's it's Scaramanga, right? It's manga, or is it manga?
I think Scaramanga was what I think I heard, but
it's one of those.
Think so, but it could be Scaramanga.
Yeah,
but I think it's
you're right. But it's one of those names. Like if you say it enough one way, you're like, maybe that is right.
I think you wouldn't want to get that scar in there. That's what yeah. Maybe Scare works too, though.
But it is actually spelled Scar, so that makes sense. Maud Adams is interesting because she actually shows up again as the title character in Octopussy. I honestly cannot remember for the life of me if she's a villain or not because I haven't seen that movie in so long, but I know she's Octopussy. Hervé Villechaize plays Nick Nack. Okay, we've got, man, these henchmen names in the 70s Bond films are pretty terrible. Well, Mr. Went, Mr. Kidd was fine, but we had Teehee in last week. Now we got Nick Nack. We're gonna have Jaws coming up.
Yeah.
Anyways, he is of course known, I would think, by Tattoo on Fantasy Island. I mean, that's how I know him. And then apparently quite the ladies' man. So.
Probably,
but he, sadly,
from what
he
I
passed
understand.
away in 93. So he has not been with us for quite a while. Clifton James is back as J.W. Pepper.
Thank God. This movie needed an infusion of Clifton James.
Oh my God. It's amazing how the attempts at humor, which we were talking about last week, and even Diamonds Are Forever, how it was getting a little like they couldn't really find their voice, and they completely lose it in this movie. I mean, the comedy in this movie is insane.
It's racist too. It's pretty racist.
Oh well, yeah, absolutely. Are you talking about specifically J.W. Pepper? Because
yes.
And
it's entirely played for laughs. And I'm sitting there just going, even in 1974, that seems. I mean, it's not more racist than anything else that's coming out than around these times, but that's just, I don't know. It was just a flat out shocking to hear.
Yeah, there were some things he said that were just ugh. But I guess I'm thinking more like the big swings, like the car, stuff like that. I mean, it's both it's awful, it's awful. But then at the same time, you're kind of like, I don't know. After you watch this movie a few times, it's kind of like Jason Takes Manhattan. It just wears you down, and you start noticing the positives. But anyways, Richard Liu plays another villain, kind of named High Fat. But anyways, Richard Liu plays him. He's like a big boss in Hong Kong that Scaramanga is working for initially or is hired by, but he eventually kills him, and kind of that kicks in the second half where Scaramanga is like the big villain that's trying to take over the world or whatever. Liu did a lot of TV after this. This was his final film role, but he did a ton of television after this. But he does have an interesting credit list. He's like extras and stuff like that in a lot of early stuff. But still, he was in movies like After the Thin Man, Frank Capra's Lost Horizon, Samuel Fuller's The Still Helmet. He had a lot of really interesting films that he was in. I guess I'll talk about also the last like cast member specific to this film as Soon. I'm going to go Soon Taik O.
Okay.
He plays Lieutenant Hip.
Mm-hmm.
He's the Felix Leiter of Hong Kong, I guess, is what I would call him.
Yeah, sounds right.
I knew him. I knew I recognized him. And when I started looking through his IMDb, I was really sad to say that I recognized him because I've seen Missing in Action Part 2 way too many times.
Oh, well, there you go. Mm-hmm. That's his magnum
I felt
opus.
really bad. Like, I'm so sorry. This is the movie I know you from.
Yeah.
Because that's not a good movie. He also did the voice of... I don't know this character's name, but it's in Mulan. It's Fa Zhao, I think is how you pronounce it. And then Bernard Lee is back. He's not going to be with us too much longer. I think he dies in 1981, so I think he's only got a couple more of these left. But he gets a kind of a sizable role this time. Like, he has a little bit more to do.
Yep.
Especially when the last few films, it's felt like he hasn't really been in it much at all, maybe for a scene.
Yep.
But he actually gets a few scenes in here. And Lois Maxwell, Moneypenny, Desmond Llewellyn is Q. All those people are back.
Desmond Llewellyn has maybe too big of a role considering what he is in this franchise. It's kind of weird. Like he wasn't in the last movie, so it's almost like they're like, making up for it in this one.
Maybe so.
And he's suddenly like, he's got all this intel that he normally wouldn't have. Like, he's the guy who builds gadgets, and I know that they're trying to get away from gadgets for a really long time, but like in this movie, he's like knows all this stuff, this inside info about the operations of bad guys and stuff in this. So it's kind of weird to hear him spout off all this stuff like he's been in the field this whole time. But
yeah, the gadget thing is still so weird to me. That's one of the things I've taken away from watching these films recently, is that maybe that just doesn't really become much of a thing until like maybe the late 70s and through the 80s. Because I mean, like, I always think of gadgets when I think of Bond, but like,
it could be a broccoli thing. Saltzman was the guy saying, let's don't do this anymore. And because this is the 9th film, and we even have like a ranking specifically for gadgets, because I was just thinking in my head we should, but they're just like the last like 3 movies, there's been like none. Other than, I mean, I guess in this, the golden gun, maybe there's that car, there's the car plane. I mean, there's stuff like that, but I don't even think those are really gadgets. Oh my God, that car plane is amazing. So this at one point, which we talked about this, I think on the On Her Majesty's Secret Service episode, this was going to follow You Only Live Twice. And they were actually going to get Roger Moore they were trying to get Roger Moore. But a couple things. Roger Moore was attached to the Saint, so he couldn't come do it. But then also they couldn't do that one. Well, they had picked Cambodia to film in. This was in the late 60s, and the Samlat uprising had just begun or was going on, and that was a big thing in there, so they couldn't film there. And so instead, I guess, of trying to... And then once they couldn't get more, I guess they just decided they were going to do something else. So they did On Her Majesty's Secret Service, because I guess they finally had locations and stuff for that. So they make this one, ends up being the second Roger Moore film. So lucky him, he still gets to be in it. I already mentioned the thing about it being released so close to Live and Let Die. So the first draft was by Tom Mankiewicz. His was almost solely supposedly like it was like a battle of wills. Like, it was all about, Scaramanga was kind of obsessed with Bond. It almost kind of reminded me of like an early version of like Mr. Glass. Like, he's like looking for like his equal, like his yang to his yen or whatever, however you want to say that. That's kind of what the basis, but then Mankiewicz, he turned in the draft. They wanted a lot of changes. He was just kind of tired of writing Bond films, and he said he thought it showed in the script. So he just walked away. He's like, you might want to just get somebody else to finish this. So they brought Maibaum back. Richard Maibaum comes in. He nixes a lot of the Scaramanga is Bond's equal. Like, you don't really get any of that. But anyway, so he nixes a lot of that. He decides to use the 1973 energy crisis as the backdrop. At least he says he did. And he created the MacGuffin of the movie, which is the Solex agitator. Yeah.
I still do not fucking know what that thing does, really.
I don't either.
I get I get the general. I don't know. I have no idea.
And we'll talk about it during we talked about the plotting of this movie. I didn't understand it whatsoever. So it'll be fun to dissect that a little bit.
Yeah,
when we
try
get
to figure out what the hell that thing is. But it has something to do with energy.
But it's a MacGuffin.
It's
so
100%.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah, it's nothing.
Yeah.
And also, according to Mankiewicz, the duels, what he said he was inspired by, the duel with Scaramanga at the end is based on, it's the climax of Shane, which is sadly a movie I still haven't seen. I feel like I have though, because I know parts of it so well, and the comeback Shane, and is it City Slickers that talks about that? Which I don't know. I know there's some movie I saw as a child that mentioned Shane a bunch. I think it might have been City Slickers. I can't remember.
Could have been that.
But anyways, there were 3 different Golden Gun props made in a 20th Century Fox poll from 2008. A lot of weird things happened in 2008, by the way. But in a 20th Century Fox poll for 2008, of the most popular film weapons, the Golden Gun ranked 6th. Are there really not that many good film weapons? Because that seems high. But
yeah,
whatever.
And nothing about the Golden Gun seems to be particularly awesome because
it's just
it's Scaramanga's character that makes the Golden Gun a thing. Exactly. So I don't get it. It's
so weird. And other stuff I'll get back to that in a second, the 2008. But this was why one of the Golden Gun props was discovered to have been stolen in 2008 from a prop shop. And the other big thing in this movie, there's a car plane. And by that, if you haven't watched it, it's literally a car that has like a plane on the top of it. Mm-hmm. That could be driven. Like there actually is a person driving it, but it couldn't fly, which is not surprising at all. But
weird. I heard that they did build one that could.
Well, they built a remote controlled. Yes. Okay, I guess it's the one that's being driven on there.
The person who built the thing that's this based on apparently died trying to fly it or whatever or something like that, and they were excited about having this in the movie until that happened, of course. And then they built this other thing that actually took off or whatever.
Yeah, so. it was just a remote controlled one. It was just not. It wasn't the original one that was built. But no, they definitely had one that flew. But it just wasn't that one. And the corkscrew stunt, which is the car. This car, there's a half like a bridge is broken out or whatever. So the car jumps up in the air, ramps off the first part of the bridge, does a 360 turn, and lands. It was cool to hear, though. It was done. Like, I don't know how they would not have done it. Like, I don't know how you would fake that in 1974. But that's the only thing amazing about it. It looks ridiculous.
My only issue with that scene is that they turn it into a comedy bit instead of just letting it happen.
Yes.
And there's a lot in the behind the scenes about that scene, how they did it and everything. And apparently they had the stunt coordinator from Live and Let Die was going to be doing this. And he was talking to a rival stunt guy at lunch. And he was telling him about this stunt that he was going to do for the Man with the Golden Gun. And the guy who ends up getting the job hears about it and calls Broccoli about it and says, I'm going to do this, whatever. And they apparently had already been doing this stunt in the Astrodome or something. That was
it was like a show. It was like a car show.
Yeah. And so they get a guy that they think can do the stunt out there. And of course, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. One of the things was, what happens if the car falls into the water? Where you're going to have a guy with all these harnesses and crap, down in the water, drowning basically. And so they had people, they had a crane out there. They had ambulances, everything off the set. And, but the guy does the corkscrew thing on the first try. And then it was Guy Hamilton came up to him and says, all right, just in case, let's do that one again. And the stuntman said, no. And he apparently, that was the first time he had ever tried the stunt. And he got it in the first try. He's like, I'm not doing that again.
That's the most amazing thing about this, because we've heard in the past how they've wrecked cars and destroyed cars and all these problems, and they had to bring in different people. But this one, it just went off. The guy's name, by the way, was Lauren Bumps Willard, which would have been a better name than J.W. Pepper, I think, for that character. But
yeah.
He committed on the first take. I also thought it was interesting. It was first tested as a computer simulation, and that simulation was the first of its kind. Like, this was kind of, I mean, obviously this is the early 70s, so computers, it's a whole different thing.
It was a thing that investigated car crashes and how car crashes happened, and they showed the images on the behind the scenes. This little, like, it's very, very old graphic interface where it's basically just lines and stuff, but you can see the car driving in the simulation and everything, and it figures out all the physics and everything. It's really cool.
Neat. I just, for somebody that I just like grew up when there weren't really a lot of computers, it was just interesting to hear they were still doing this kind of stuff in the early 70s. Maybe a few years before I was even born. So another thing in 2008 that happened, Top Gear, the British car show, they tried to repeat the stunt but couldn't do it, which I thought was kind of funny. The stunt is in the Guinness Book of World Records as the first astro spiral jump on film. John Barry, who makes mostly really good decisions, but he added the slide whistle sound, which Broccoli really hated, but let him keep it in. I don't know why.
Somehow stayed in the movie. I don't understand it. That's why I hate the scene.
Yeah, no,
I love the stunt. I hate the scene.
Yes, I don't like it either, but it could have been like just a cool moment, I guess, is what they just had like the score pounding in or something, or just nothing, even just have them do the jump. Just be like, oh, that was cool. But then when you add that slide whistle, it's like Benny Hill.
Yeah.
And I mean, and the movie definitely had some comedic stuff in it. And a lot of it, some of it racist, but nothing like that took it to a whole other, like that was like a parody kind of scene. And it's crazy that it's just that one thing. It's just that slide whistle. You take that out of it, I think that scene's fine. Maybe you don't show J.W. Pepper going, oh, or whatever, but
yeah.
I mean, I think there's a way to do that without it being, because it's really impressive. I mean, they actually fucking did it. You know, it's not like the jump in Speed, you know, or something. You're watching a thing do a thing. So, anyways, not a whole lot else to talk about. I will say, this film did make money, but it was the fourth lowest grossing film in the franchise. I think it is now the fourth lowest grossing film in the franchise. At the time, I think it must have been the first, but it finished with $21 million in the U.S., which got it to the 21st highest grossing film that year. It was just under Death Wish and Chinatown, and it was right ahead of this movie called The Groove Tube, which I have heard of, but I've never seen. Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein both in the top 10 that year. Mel Brooks had
I imagine The Godfather 2 was number one.
No, Blazing Saddles is number one. Godfather Part 2 is number 6.
Interesting.
Earthquake was number 5. Young Frankenstein was number 4. Trial of Billy Jack was number 3. Of course, Billy Jack was like number 2 or whatever the last year. Towering Inferno was number 2, and Blazing Saddles was 1.
Yeah, it makes sense.
That's a crazy top 10 though. Murder on the Orient Express was 10. Yeah. Texas Chainsaw Massacre was 15. 74 is kind of a strong year. So I don't know. Like, I've heard people say like this almost killed the franchise. I couldn't find anything that said that, but I do know that they obviously, with all the legal stuff and whatnot, and they had to just kind of go back to the, back to the, not basics, but I don't know. We'll talk about Spy Who Loved Me next week, but it's maybe one of the most insane differences or leaps between films I've ever seen in a franchise. So, film got mixed reviews. Moore and Eklund's performances were often cited as the big issue, along with the comedic approach. Christopher Lee, pretty much across the board, everybody really liked him and thought he was a really cool villain. But Moore and Eklund, for whatever, were the ones that most people didn't seem to care for. Oh, and also Hervé. Hervé's character got some interesting stuff said about it. But
he's pretty annoying.
He is, but I don't know. I kind of love him. I don't know why, but he like I said, I think this movie just wears you down after you've seen it a few times.
It wore me down enough that I don't like it. So,
well, let's go ahead and get into that.
Okay.
Because I think that's where the fun talk's going to be this year. So this is a segment we like to call a review to a kill.
I've got you in my sights.
Get the fuck out of my sight before I demolish you.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
There's no need to shout. I'm not shouting!
Why don't you stop your whining and get on with it? I've heard this shit before.
We are going to give you our thoughts on the film we are discussing this week. And this week, we are discussing The Man with the Golden Gun. Copyright Lulu. I will say one thing I wanted to do just because I find the plot of this movie insane. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I think I'm going to do is try to explain the plot.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a pre-title sequence with a gangster named Rodney. Mark Lawrence actually comes back. He played a mobster in Diamonds Are Forever, and they actually bring him back to play this gangster at the beginning. He's playing this like game, I guess, with Scaramanga, where Knick Knack is like kind of emceeing it.
Yeah, like, he looks like he's a control dungeon master type of thing.
Yeah, because it's kind of like it's like a fun house.
And he
almost
goes to it's a fun
sort.
house, but like he's up in this control room with all this very 1970s shiny metal, control room. Basically, you can imagine it if you can just think of any movie in the 70s. That's what the control panel looks like.
Yeah, exactly. And Scaramanga ends up killing him. You also find out that Scaramanga and Knick Knack apparently have like little bets going on, which I don't know how Knick Knack gets paid if like Scaramanga gets defeated. I couldn't really figure that one out, but whatever.
And Scaramanga probably knows that he can never win based on that. But like, maybe there is something that kicks in when he dies or whatever. You know what this reminded me of? The opening of this reminded me of openings of Columbo is what it reminded me.
Yeah. Oh, this movie looks like an episode of a TV series.
Yeah.
Like, if you told me this was an episode of, like, $6 Million Man, I'd be like, yeah, I believe you.
Yeah, yeah.
But I will say at the end of that scene, though, this is the pre-title. The pre-title sequence actually is okay. It's fine. Yeah. But Rodney, the gangster, he falls down. And when he falls down after he's been shot, there is, like, this amazing, like, wax statue of Roger Moore's Bond. It's like Scaramanga, like, had Madame Tussauds on his payroll. Bond is on a mission where he's supposed to track down this. This is another situation where Bond somehow lucks his way into, like, even though he gets taken off this mission, he lucks his way back into a mission that has everything to do with this. But anyways, he's tracking down this energy scientist named Gibson. M takes him off the case because they believe that Scaramanga has been hired to kill Bond because they've been sent this bullet.
And okay. I want to talk about this bullet, okay?
Yeah, let's do it. I think this is how we should do it. Just go through this crazy plot.
Okay, so they get sent a bullet that has 007's numbers in, like, written on it or whatever. And so they think, Scaramanga is doing a challenge to Bond and everything.
Yeah.
And so most of the movie you're sitting there going, why would he go through all of this trouble of like putting 007 on a bullet so that he has to go through all of this investigation? Like they have to put it under a microscope, and you have Q and some other guy who are like, this gold can only be found in this particular part of the world, and so on and so forth. So then they have to find the person who made the bullet, and they have to do all this other stuff. So this whole thing is building up to the fact that Scaramanga wants Bond, because we saw him shoot Bond's wax fingers off at the beginning of this, and then we find out Scaramanga didn't send that bullet. It was Maude Adams the whole time, and then you're sitting there going, if Maude Adams sent this bullet, why didn't she just tell him where everything was then?
Exactly, because she thinks that but I mean she is scared for her life, and that does actually end up ends up getting her killed. So,
but why would you make them go through all of that trouble though? If you
exactly,
like even if you do that, don't you put yourself in danger? So I know
what you're saying, because even if you can find a way to send a bullet, why can't you find a way to send a letter with it that says, by the way,
go to
don't be freaked out.
Go to this island in Phuket, Thailand, and that's where Scaramanga is. Oh my God, I've got more later, but here we go.
Oh yeah, no, well, that's part of it too, but just the basics. Like, so Bond basically he didn't get fired, but he's what do you call it? He's put to the sides, whatever. He's sitting on the bench.
Yeah.
He's not allowed to do anything. But of course, he goes and does stuff on his own because he's Bond. He ends up getting like a tip about this belly dancer that has one of the bullets in her belly button.
So dumb.
In Beirut.
Yes.
So he goes there, he gets the bullet.
And
he then traces the. Oh, sorry.
If
go
there's
ahead.
anything about this that I like, I don't like anything about the belly dancer having a bullet in her belly button. But if there's anything I like about this, there's an actual reason for Bond to sleep with a woman this time, other than like you remember in the Sean Connery days. There's the point where he's like, what I did for king and country, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Like, okay, whatever. You really just wanted to get laid, but you're whatever. and like never does the sex have any like real meaning whatsoever in what they do. But in this one, at least it looks like, okay, he can steal something by doing this. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
at least I like that, but I don't
agree.
like anything else beyond that.
No, I agree with you. But he then traces the bullet back to a gun maker in Macau. Then he finds out the shipment, which Andrea Anders is handling, Maud Adams. She ends up giving Bond info, which once again, she's talking to him, so why can't she just tell him everything at this point? Because she ends up giving him info about Scaramanga being at this club.
Yeah.
It's called the Bottoms Up Club. By the way, there's like a couple of strip clubs in this movie, which is really interesting because we had an entire Bond movie in Vegas and we didn't see a single strip club.
But this is another part of the plot that I didn't understand because it takes a while for her to finally say, okay, I deliver these bullets from this weapons maker to him, and then he brings them out to his island or whatever. So I'm sitting there going, Bond now is just going to have to keep surveillance on Maud Adams this whole time, right? Instead, there's a scene like a scene where Christopher Lee is like about to have sex with her, and then like in the next shot almost he's Christopher Lee is like aiming to kill this scientist guy who we think is Bond this whole time. We think he's trying to kill Bond. Bond just so happens to be in the street when this happens.
Yeah, this is where the movie starts losing me.
But I'm sitting there going, well, if your whole thing now, your whole mission now is to find this guy, don't you just stay with Maud Adams, or at least stay or like keep close, and then once she gives him the bullets, you just follow wherever he goes? I didn't understand that whole thing. And
I don't either.
Yeah.
And I hate like this is I will say the first like 45 it's just going to be similar to what we both said about Live and Let Die, but the difference is Live and Let Die for the first like 45 minutes is like, this could be the best Bond movie ever. And then it just kind of shits itself. But this one is never going to be anywhere close to being the best Bond movie ever. But there is like, I'm interested in what's going on. Like, I'm curious to see, why does he want to kill Bond? Who hired him? When I'm still thinking that Bond is the target. But then when he gets to this club, which I think this is right around the hour mark, he starts walking, like you said, Christopher Lee's up on the side of the street. He's about to shoot somebody. You think it's Bond. He ends up shooting this other guy that's with Hip, the Asian police officer or whatever, the Asian Felix Leiter. And not only is he not trying to kill Bond, but Bond realizes immediately that it's that fucking scientist that he was trying to... And that's ridiculous. I mean, just the fact that all this stuff connects. Kind of like in Diamonds Are Forever, how Blofeld ends up being connected to this random thing that Bond gets assigned. It's kind of similar stuff here. And I honestly don't know really what's going on after this point, because then Bond gets like kind of arrested, but you find out that Hip's actually working with MI6 and all these people. So they go to it's the wreck of the Queen Elizabeth, which apparently Broccoli saw when they were scouting.
And now I will say it is pretty interestingly shot when they go into this thing, because you see all these like it's at least looks like Dutch angles, even though I think it's just it's just the way the camera is positioned.
I think so. I know what you're saying.
Or way the set is positioned, but I think that's kind of cool how they're in that. But that's really where it all ends, is the coolness.
Yeah, but I might have just missed something, but I got confused as to like, M already knew that Bond wasn't the target. Like, I felt like that was okay,
exactly,
But that's so confusing, and I hate that. Like, I just hate that. The reason I hate that, I think, is because eventually Bond does become the target anyway. So because he's trying to go after Scaramanga. So Scaramanga obviously is going to be like, I got to kill Bond.
This sounds exactly like what would happen if you had a writer starting on a script.
Yes.
And then another person comes in and says, I don't like some of this stuff. I'm going to add this stuff. And then they forget that there's little seeds of another story going on in the story that they are editing.
Because like the bullet being sent to him, like that sounds more like the Mankiewicz idea that Scaramanga is obsessed with Bond and like wants to prove he can beat him or whatever. It's like a Kraven the Last Hunter kind of thing. Kraven the Hunter kind of thing. And but it doesn't make sense in this story.
Yeah.
Like you're saying. And then I guess they changed it to the fact that Maude Adams sent it. That's supposed to be a twist. But then once again, why didn't she send a letter with it?
Yeah.
Why didn't she try to contact Bond before this? When she did get alone with Bond, so clearly she wasn't scared about being found out she was alone with Bond.
Mm-hmm.
So why didn't she tell him then?
Yeah.
Oh, and there's that weird fucking... Okay. Oh, my God. I'm going to... Good night. I'm sorry. The actress's name escapes me.
Oh, Britt Eklund?
Britt Eklund. Yeah. Britt Eckhardt. Britt Eklund. So when she gets introduced, this is really weird, too, because... I guess before that, though, Bond does eventually get captured by... There's this mob boss named High Fat. Mm-hmm. And M and Q, like you said, Q's like doing research and stuff on these people, and it doesn't make any sense. Like, what does this have to do with gadgets? Although he does every now and then get to chime in. Oh, yeah, no, we're working on something like that. So that is a thing. You know, it's dumb.
Yeah.
But anyways, there's High Fat. So Bond decides to go see High Fat and somehow thinks he can get away with pretending to be Scaramanga.
This is the old Mission Impossible thing.
Oh my God. Scaramanga has a third nipple, which I don't think we've mentioned other than I made that joke about you having one at the beginning of the podcast. So Scaramanga has a third nipple. Why people know this, though, is crazy to me. But like that, because that's super defining.
Yeah.
That's not a lot of people have third nipples, I don't think. I mean, maybe someone's really
Christopher Lee says it's more common than you think later on.
Probably is. That's true. That's true.
He does say that.
Chandler Bing had one on
But
Friends,
that's one of the things that's funny is that right off the beginning, they tell you about the superfluous third nipple. And then later on, somebody says, it's Bond asking Maude Adams. He's like, give me some distinguishing characteristics so I know who I'm looking for. It's just like, well, he's got a superfluous third nipple. And he's like, that's not going to tell me anything. He's going to be clothed. So tell me where, So like none of this makes any difference.
Well, no. And that scene is crazy because luckily for Bond, there is like a naked Asian girl swimming that somehow wants him to get in with her. Right. I don't know what that's about.
Exactly.
So that gives him a reason to take his shirt off. And then so when High Fat comes over, High Fat can say,
what was your plan before the naked lady?
Yeah. We're just going to be like, as soon as the guy was like, hey, get off the property.
Hold on, let me show you.
Let
me show you I've got a third nipple. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's crazy. But that ruse does not go on very long. And see, that's the thing. Like, I mean, Bond is so well known. There is a wax statue of, which he probably doesn't know this, but still, there is a wax statue of him. How does this dude go anywhere?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's crazy. But he gets captured by High Fat because they're like, yeah, you're full of shit. And so they hold him at this martial arts academy.
Oh my God.
Where he has to fight these students or something.
Yeah. Just out of nowhere, they're like, here, fight these guys. And then he cheats against one of them where they're about to give the courtesy bow, and he kicks him while they're doing the courtesy bow. And then they're like, all right, let's get some real fighters in here. And that guy is obviously like, there's no way that Roger Moore would...
I don't know who that guy was. I like that second guy though, because I like the way he acts that scene, because like Bond starts to bow and he kind of bows, but he's like looking at him the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not getting kicked in the chin. But then, and then there's a scene earlier where I guess Hip takes him here, but has like his two nieces are in the car with him because he's got to take them to school or something. And then they all end up showing up to save Bond. And then those two girls, like, I guess they're supposed to be high school kids, and Hip just kick the shit out of these like martial artists.
Well, and there's a lot of weird stuff here. First off, they don't think they take him to the academy, right?
No.
They take him somewhere else, and then he ends up getting caught when he goes to, I don't know, somewhere later. But like, there's a point when they show up at the academy, he goes, "How did you know to find me here?" And he's like, "Well, High Fat owns one of these places." And I'm like, "Oh, so you knew to come here of all places and at the exact right time to save
High
him."
Fat, like, owns everything.
Yeah, and one of the girls is played by the woman who plays the landlady in Kung Fu Hustle. So
it was one of the nieces.
It's one of the nieces. Yeah.
Ah, okay. Well, that's cool. That makes sense. I was thinking about that when I was watching it because I started watching it after you mentioned that.
Yep.
Very cool. A Recotopia episode and a Bond episode that'll be very far apart.
Very far apart. Yep.
So after that, when he gets back to where he's trying to figure out what's going on, he meets up with Goodnight, the Britt Eklund character, and this scene is so weird because he just says "Goodnight," blah 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 blah, and I feel like there is a scene missing because it almost feels like there's a fucking movie missing because you feel like these two have had a history, like something has happened, but we don't know who she is, and it's just the way she's not really introduced in that scene. She shows up, he bitches at her, and then we're just off to the next thing, and I'm like, who the fuck is this? Like, you have not established this character in any way whatsoever, and it's so weird. There has to be like some scene missing or something that, or something like a conversation. Something is missing. If not, that's just some really lousy writing. Then after this, on another, Scaramanga meets up with High Fat, so we do find out they know each other. But then Scaramanga kills him and takes the energy device, which we talked about earlier, the Solex agitator.
Yeah.
That was stolen off of, Gibson had that on him, which I can't believe Gibson was just like carrying that like in his pocket. Like that's stupid. That thing should have been under lock and key somewhere.
Yep.
Around this time is when we find out Andrea Anders is the one who sent the bullet to London. And this is a really fucked up thing where I don't know if him and Goodnight are about to have sex, but she's been fucking with him all night. Like, pretending like she's kind of into him and then be like, yeah, whatever, I'm gone. But then she shows up at his room or whatever, like in this nightie. I assume they're about to like at least have a romantic evening of some sort. But then when Andrea Anders shows up, he shoves her in the closet and then goes and has sex with Maud Adams while she's in the closet. And then afterwards, she comes out, and I mean, she's a little mad, but it's more just like, you dog.
Well, and she's been sleeping in the closet standing this whole time.
Yeah.
So weird, man.
Everything about that.
Yeah, like there's a point where they're about to have sex. She puts the covers over Britt Eklund, and then Maud Adams shows up. And then
that's right. They are.
And then they're about to have sex, and then she and Maud Adams goes away or whatever, and then that's when he takes her to the closet, and she doesn't seem too offended by it. Like,
no, it's like, God,
I know you go ahead and bang that girl. Don't worry about it.
God, there's a scene. And it made me think of this really dumb movie called "He's Just Not That Into You." Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, I've seen it.
And so Bradley Cooper, typical, like, only in a movie, Bradley Cooper is married to Jennifer Connelly and is cheating on Jennifer Connelly with Scarlett Johansson. And he is about to, like, I guess have sex with Scarlett Johansson in his office. Jennifer Connelly shows up. Johansson goes in the closet. And then Connelly, and they end up having sex. And then Scarlett Johansson comes out, and he starts to say, "I'm sorry." And she says, "Don't ever fucking talk to me again." That is how you should act.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you have been forced into that situation.
Exactly.
But anyways, that's a bad movie, though. Do not go see that movie if you haven't seen it. Well, I mean, it's not. I mean, I don't know. It's fine, I guess. There's probably some decent moments in it. It's just one of those movies with like that big sprawling cast in a romantic comedy.
Stop making excuses for "He's Just Not That Into You," Jonathan. Stop making excuses for that movie.
It's my favorite movie. What are you gonna do? That's actually, I think that's the only thing I remember about that movie. Oh, and I do remember too, it's all the Jennifer Connelly and Bradley Cooper stuff. But I remember Bradley Cooper is supposed to have stopped smoking, but he's sneaking them. And I remember when Jennifer Connelly basically tells him to fuck off, she like leaves a note on top of a carton of cigarettes. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Anders' duplicity is found out eventually. She's killed. That's kind of a cool scene. Bond meets her at this, like, I can't remember what's going on. Is it like a circus?
It's a kickboxing tournament.
Circus. I'm getting Diamonds Are Forever mixed up in my Man with the Golden Gun. But he goes to her. He's talking to her, and then it's really well shot. Like, if that's her, like, and it's not like I think it has to be her. She's doing a really good job there of not moving. And then it slowly pans down, and like her eyes are wide open. It slowly pans down, and you see that bullet. I don't know if she would be sitting up like that the whole time, but I don't know. I don't know how bodies work after bullets enter them. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't either. Yeah, I feel like she should be slumping down afterwards, but who knows? It's just a movie, Jonathan. It's just a movie.
It's a pretty creepy image too, so I like it.
We got to make it so that Bond doesn't know she's dead right away, and then he has to inspect her and find the bullet. That's
and then
the way
he's pretending
works.
she's alive again, and that he has a reason to look through her purse. And then Scaramanga shows up.
Yep.
But then Bond ends up, he actually has the Solex at one point. He gives it to Goodnight, right?
Yeah, they apparently, something happened when like her purse spilled out or something, and it's on the ground with all the peanuts and whatever that people have been throwing around. And like he picks it up, he pretends that he needs to reach down for something, and he gets it. Which is weird because it says Scaramanga looked everywhere to find it, and it's just sitting there on the fucking floor. So I don't know.
Oh, that's right, because he says you won't find it because I didn't or whatever. I remember. But I love that. I love this shot. This is probably my favorite shot in the movie where Britt Eklund is by the trunk. She's putting a locator or whatever. Yeah. And I mean Christopher Lee just walks out of nowhere, just pushes her in, like in one motion, pushes her in and shuts the trunk. And I don't know how to explain it, but you know what I'm talking about because you watched it, but it's just this really nice, like just 1, 2, 3 punch kind of thing. I don't know. It's really funny. So she ends up in the trunk of this car. This is a car too that also gets the plane wings and ends up flying. And all that fun stuff. And then Bond. So Bond. Oh, I forgot. This is where J.W. Pepper shows up, and he's visiting. He's tourist with his wife, who clearly can't fucking stand that dude. You can tell just the way she talks.
Yep.
J.W.
Yeah.
So he hangs around. He's pretty racist for a few minutes about people that live there, and then he sees Bond and ends up in a car chase with Bond.
Yep. He's like, he ends up calling, like, he ends up radioing over to one of the people, and he's like, tell my wife I'm on a mission, and blah, blah, blah. And like, all right.
And there's that one part where they get to the cops. He's like, let me handle this. This is my area of expertise, or whatever he says. Oh.
Yeah, of course, I think also just because Pepper shows back up, they also have to have yet another speedboat chase in this movie. So yet another speedboat chase. If you didn't have enough speedboats in the last movie, you can get more.
Because that's what was really lacking in the last film. Was not enough speedboats.
Yep, exactly. There was only 3 hours of speedboats chase in the last movie, so
I'm really curious if this ends up being a Roger Moore thing, like every single movie there's a speedboat chase.
Yeah.
Like I kind of hope so at this point. Speedboat chases were a big thing for a while though.
Yeah.
Like you had like Miami Vice and all kinds of stuff. But anyways, so all that happens. JW is in the car with him when he makes the jump.
Yep.
It's awful. I mean, the jump is fine, but
the jump is great. The slide whistle's terrible.
Yeah. Slide whistle's terrible. J.W. Pepper is always awful. Bond tracks Goodnight though through all this with J.W. Pepper. He ends up at Scaramanga's island, so not surprising at all. He ends up has to play this game or this duel in the fun house with Nick Nack, which Nick Nack's really fucking with Bond in this one though. He's not really fucking with Scaramanga as much.
It's like the rules of that whole thing changed. Yeah.
Well, and Bond gets the drop on Scaramanga. I still have no idea how.
And you think that because the challenge is he's gonna have 6 bullets in his Walther PPK, and Scaramanga's gonna have just the 1 bullet. Yeah. So throughout the whole thing, Bond is shooting bullets that he may run out, and that never becomes a factor whatsoever. Exactly. They're like, oh, you've shot 3 bullets, Bond, and then he ends up killing him on the 4th. So,
oh my god. Then we get the typical like this whole post-mission, post-coital scene where the henchman shows up. Like, so Nick Nack is like somehow on this boat, and He drops in literally.
We've passed over the whole solar thing and what Scaramanga plans to do with it.
Yeah, we could definitely go back to that.
Well, I mean, I don't think we talked about it enough because we talked about it being a MacGuffin, but the thing is that he wants it for is this huge, like, he's got this solar like panel that's cooled with helium or something like that, and all he needed was this solar, whatever it's called.
Solex.
Yeah, he needed this thing, this one little box to complete it. I'm like, you had this entire thing built, and but you needed this one thing that some other asshole has to complete it, which I guess you knew about this device before you started building the big, huge thing on this island.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something missing as far as when he started building this and when he found out about this device.
Oh yeah, no, doesn't go over that at all. Like, you have no idea. You have no idea why he knows about this. And like, why he wants to kill High Fat and take over all that stuff. I mean, he's been acting. I mean, he's been the way he has been for however many years, and it was hard to understand why, nobody knew his face, and he made a lot of money killing people. And it doesn't make any sense to me why all of a sudden he wants to come out in the open.
Right.
And when he's been this secretive.
Yeah. So that whole system that he shows Bond is like, he's actually thinking about making money with this and selling the technology to other people.
To the highest bidder.
And having their own stuff that's built. And then it's like, okay, well, that doesn't seem so evil. But, oh, wait a minute. He's got a laser beam thing that he also has created that he shows he blows up the plane with blows up Bond's plane with. Just so happens to be in the perfect spot for him to blow up the plane. But like, all that other stuff wasn't enough. We have to also make sure that he's got a death ray that's ready to go on this. And Bond even says, like, before the death ray thing comes into the play, Bond even says at one point, like, the oil sheiks will buy you out to not have this solar power. And he's like, I've already thought of that or whatever. And it's like, just a lot of, like, none of that whole motive makes any sense to me at all.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. And it's just like, he's not taking over anything. He's just trying to sell it. Like, it's not even like he's got these visions of grandeur and he's going to be like Lex Luthor. But it's just, that's all there is to it. He's just trying to sell this thing that he's making. And then also he's got a laser, because every fucking villain has a laser. I wish they would, like, actually refer back to stuff, like Scaramanga could have been like, yeah, I know, like, Blofeld was trying to hit you up with that space laser. This is way cooler than that, or something.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyways, yeah. So it's like I was trying to, like I was saying earlier, for the first, like, hour of this, I'm kind of like, I don't particularly like it, but I'm curious as to what's going to happen. Like, I'm always like, there's intriguing. I mean, I'd already knew because I'd watched it before, but I'm just saying in general, like, it's setting up some, like, potentially intriguing things. But I like the idea of Scaramanga is actually after Bond the whole time better, but that's not what happened. So but like I said, he ends up being after Bond anyways, because Bond is coming for him. So I just feel like you could have just left it as whatever Mankiewicz wanted to do, maybe tighten it up a little bit or whatever. But
yeah, now I interrupted to talk about the solar thing. You were talking about Hervé Villachet showing up at the very end of this.
Yes.
And because once again, Bond is about to have sex with Goodnight, and they keep getting interrupted. And even after the Hervé Villachet thing, which is really dumb. I mean, it's just him throwing wine bottles at Bond and all sorts of stuff, and Bond ends up putting him in a suitcase, and he ends up, like, putting him on the sails of the boat that they're on, and then they're about to have sex again, and then this thing comes up from M, like a phone thing. He's trying to call Bond on this phone or whatever, and all this stuff. So that's how it ends. I thought it was kind of interesting that they brought Hervé Villachet's back on this last thing, because remember in Live and Let Die, at the very end of that movie, Jeffrey Holder shows up on the train, and I think a lot of people thought that he was going to end up doing something or come back later, or and it just ends up being this weird scene. Oh, there's Jeffrey Holder on a train going ha 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 or whatever.
And I don't remember if they keep doing this, but they've done this now for 3 movies in a row, because Diamonds Are Forever ends with Mr. Kid and Mr. Went show up. So that's what I'm saying. Like, this is kind of an interesting thing that kind of becomes like a trope, even though it really wasn't before Diamonds Are Forever. And I don't know if they keep doing it. I'm not sure.
Although Live and Let Die, I mean, even though it's Jeffrey Holder they show at the very end, it's Teehee that does the actual business on the train.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're correct. Jeffrey Holder does not play Teehee. You're right. I was getting confused.
Yeah, no, you're correct. Teehee does play that guy, but like at the very end,
he's on the back of the train.
Yeah, so there's this. It's funny that they bring Jeffrey Holder back for that one thing, and it's so surreal that you think maybe that's not even real. Yeah, they just kind of put that. It's like it's one of those like where Joe Pesci is firing at the screen at the end of Goodfellas type things. Yeah, but like but yeah, it is interesting that they keep bringing the secondary villain back to do one last thing on all of these. So
I see what you're saying though. Yeah, no, I just got my actors mixed up. But yeah, no, that scene at the end of the trade. Yeah, I think that's definitely just for like a gotcha moment, like right at the end. And, I don't know. Live and Let Die is so much better than that. As bad as Live and Let Die gets, though, it's so much better in this movie.
Yeah.
Like I said, after that first hour, once we find out Bond is not the target, I never remember what's going on, because I get so confused after that point. Like, just who knew what beforehand, and why Bond wasn't brought in on some of this already. Like, a lot of it didn't make any sense. And and M is like bitching at Hip and Bond for getting the scientist killed and losing the thing, but it's like maybe if you had let Bond know what the fuck was going on, he would, it doesn't make any sense. Because if they know that he's not really being targeted, I don't know why they don't let him know that immediately. Maybe they couldn't find him, but I don't know. Do you have anything good to say about it? Anything bad that you haven't talked about yet?
There's not much other than Christopher Lee is always good. That stunt, aside from the slide whistle, we've already talked about that, is good.
Yeah.
I don't think there's much else really that's good about it.
Action scenes aren't good, really. No. There's not a lot. There's just nothing that interesting. It's mostly because most of them revolve around like people with guns, trying to hide from each other and stuff like that. There's not really like fights and stuff, which is fine. But but there's nothing interesting in what little action there is. I think this film is, like you were talking about last week with Live and Let Die, like how much hornier like Bond's like one-liners were. I think this movie doubles up just on the horniness by a lot. Like I said, we go to strip clubs and Britt Eklund is about to have sex. She gets thrown in a closet. And it's just all this crazy stuff that like I just can't see happening in a Connery film.
And there's that double entendre at the end too, saying when is Goodnight gonna come? And he says, "Oh, she'll be coming shortly," and he hangs the phone or something like that.
Oh my god! And like I said, I mentioned this earlier, but it just looks like a TV show. It looks like a TV movie. Like it doesn't look like it's so weird. It's like, I don't know why. It's like they spent $7 million on it, early 70s. That's a decent chunk of change. So
it is.
It's not like it wasn't a big budgeted film, but it doesn't look like really any better than like an episode of like $6 Million Man or Columbo or whatever you want to throw in there.
Yeah.
Now, I have heard people say in the 60s and early 70s, there was television and film didn't look as different as it used to, but still, like, there's just nothing like cinematic about this. Like leading up to this one, everything's like big and grandiose. And I mean, I don't mind having a smaller like Bond film, but this is also trying to be a big Bond film. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, cause Scaramanga is just as crazy as like and big as all this as like Blofeld.
Let's just face it. The whole idea that they turned right around after Live and Let Die to try to make this movie for the next year.
Yeah.
They had one guy writing a script and then another guy coming in to do the script, and then they did this all in a year. It really shows. It really shows in this movie. Yeah.
And I mean, I think, and this is the first of, in my opinion, this is the first of 2 Bond films with Roger Moore that they cast a really cool actor as the villain. and then just don't really give him anything to do. I'm sure most people, if anybody's seen the Roger Moore films, I'm sure they know what I'm talking about, but I guess I will save that till we talk about that film. But that's the only thing I remember about this movie, is that Christopher Lee is the villain. When because I have not watched this one that often, because I've never really cared for it. It's not like unwatchable. Like it's not, I would never say it's boring. I just think it's overly convoluted, especially after it offers up such a simplistic storyline, and then just wants to become like a normal Bond bad guy, wants to take energy out of the world or whatever it is, that doesn't work. That shift is so bizarre. Britt Eklund is not very good in this, and I don't think it's her fault. I've seen her in other things and she's good. So I think this is the writing, but her character is just, one of the more like just useless like characters, female characters in the series. Like just, it's kind of irritating how they use her in this movie.
It's reminiscent of what was the movie? I'm trying to remember which one. Now these are starting to. Yeah. We're starting to get into that. Like I believe it was Diamonds Are Forever. Was it Diamonds? Yeah, it was Diamonds Are Forever, where they had a really cool female character who ends up like just being in a bikini at the end of the movie.
Oh yeah, Jules St. John. Yeah.
Yeah, and this one's the same one. This Goodnight's supposed to be a well-respected spy who does all this, and she ends up like getting kicked into a trunk and like useless pretty much. And then when the next time we see her, she's in a bikini, and I like Britt Eklund. I like seeing Britt Eklund in a bikini. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't make sense to her character, but to me, because it makes sense that a villain would do this, but make her more badass. Stop doing this, like, I don't know what to do. What?
And she's being guarded by that guy, and he like starts touching her and stuff. And I'm like, this has never happened in a Bond film. I'm not saying. I'm not saying that a bad guy wouldn't want to touch Britt Eklund. I'm just saying that like the way
it's just there's an ugliness to it that you don't need.
It's like, no, that's not like, that's like Death Wish or something. That's not James Bond.
Exactly. It's Death Wish for sure.
But yeah, I like her a lot. I've seen her, like, she's great in The Wicker Man, and I like her in a lot of stuff. But it's just the character is shitty. And also, I think Roger Moore takes a bit of a step back. I don't think it's his fault. I think it's just the way they write Bond in this. I think he's a little like, he's almost like too mean at times. Like they kind of try to bring like that kind of Connery-esque, and I just don't think that's Roger Moore.
Yeah, he slaps around Maud Adams.
And he slaps around Maud Adams at one point. And I think they figure that out pretty quickly. The next film, you're gonna, it's like you're in a completely different franchise after you've watched this.
Yep.
Live and Let Die, like halfway gets there. Man with the Golden Gun kind of like takes everything back quite a bit. And then we get Spy Who Loves Me and on from there. But there's just not, I can't, outside of Christopher Lee, there's just not much to recommend here. And Christopher Lee's not even doing anything that interesting, but it's Christopher Lee. He's a good presence, and he's scary, or he can be. He's intimidating, a lot more intimidating than like, fucking Blofeld was and like Diamonds Are Forever.
Yeah.
I don't think I have. We had to do the rankings, but before that, did you have anything else? Oh, I will say, I thought Goodnight, at least the Elizabeth Hurley and Heather Graham, Austin Powers, the first two Austin Powers movies, I felt like Goodnight might have been, maybe was part of the inspiration for some of those, because she kind of, and maybe because of how kind of more bland her character is, maybe that's where they were, choosing to use the parody, especially with Heather Graham.
Yeah, Heather Graham is trying to learn to be like how Austin Powers is, and it shows the dynamics of when she sleeps with someone compared to Austin Powers sleeping with someone. Like, there's a double standard there, and blah blah blah. But I agree. I think she's probably patterned after her.
And I'm not a huge Austin Powers fan by any means. The first two films are fine. Like, they have their moments, and then I thought Goldmember was pretty terrible. But although that opening Goldmember is kind of funny. Yep. But I do think it's funny. People do criticize it, especially like say like it hasn't held up well. There's a lot of like non-PC stuff, which that's kind of part of the joke. But sometimes it still does go a little far. Like you have the two Asian characters named Fook Me and Fook You, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
and in this movie it's Chew Me.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true. I didn't think about that. But like you said, there is still those, like, they are showing like that double standard and stuff like that, which is something I don't think people talk about in those movies enough.
Yeah.
But they're I don't know, they're fine. I never was a huge fan. So I guess we'll get into our rankings, which we've probably already kind of given these away, which is fine. We're going to rank these films in 5 different categories. Our scale will be based on something that Bond holds near and dear to his heart, as long as they are shaken and not stirred, and that would be martinis. So for each category, we go 1 to 5 martinis, 5 being the best damn liquid that has ever passed your lips, 1 being the well liquor you had to settle for or were too drunk to care that night. I think I had, going into this, I had the overall like story and stuff at a 2. I think the movie is very much like a 2-star movie, but I'm going to still give this a 1 because this is a really not a good story in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
I don't know how to not give it that. So
yeah, I think if anything deserves a 1, it's this one, and it'll be interesting to see what ends up on the bottom here once we see all the bottom feeders. But,
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I'm gonna go 1 as well, and it's sad, but there's not much here, and it's too confusing. There's too many bad things going on, and yeah, you can't really give it much more than what it is. Oddly enough, I think this is weirdly highly rated on the IMDb. Like 6.7 is not a high rating by any means, but it's higher than I think it deserves.
Absolutely.
And so, like, I don't know what people are seeing out of this. Maybe it's maybe actually 6.7 may be wrong. Oh, it is a 6.7. So on the IMDb, both this and Live and Let Die have a 6.7. And to me, that makes no sense that this one is rated just as high. It makes sense that Live and Let Die has a 6.7. This one should be like down in that 5.9, 6.1 kind of territory.
I think so too. Even like Die Another Day is at 6.1, which, God, that seems way too high from what I remember about that one. But I don't really hear people talk about this one. I don't know that I've heard too many people say this is like their least favorite. It's definitely my least favorite so far of the ones we've watched, but I've never heard anybody really praise it either. Maybe I've heard people every now and then say it's a little underrated. People that really just love Christopher Lee and just, IMDb ratings are so hard to figure out though. Like, it's funny with horror films. I've always heard a lot of other podcasters say if it's 5.0 or high, like if it's 5.0 or higher on IMDb as a horror film, it's probably pretty good.
This is correct. One thing that I noticed about a lot of independent films, not just horror, is that
true.
A movie that I think is great, I often will have these low ratings, and I'm like, just imagine if you put actors that people knew in these movies.
Yeah.
They would suddenly be like 7, 7.5, those type of things. But
yeah, that 6.7 is way too high. Way too high.
Yep.
But that's fine. Let's see. So our next one is The Bond. So Roger Moore's performance in this. What do you think? Yeah,
I mean, right now he's still pretty even keel. It's 3 for me. I don't really have much to say about that. It's not overwhelmingly good, not particularly bad.
No, I'm on the lower side of 3 because I do think he took a bit of a step back, but he's still fine. Like, I mean, he never, like, I don't know. I think I think the character is kind of all over the place tonally in this one, which is kind of unfortunate, but especially when he seemed pretty self-assured and stuff in Live and Let Die, like he already kind of seemed to know what he wanted to do. And then this feels like they're having a hard time like figuring out how to write after Connery. Whereas in Live and Let Die, it seemed like they had already figured it out. But then for some reason, they take a step back in this one. Maybe it's because they brought Maybaum back. You know, he didn't write Live and Let Die. So maybe he was throwing some more Connery Bond stuff in there. I don't know. But I'm going to give it a 3. I'm on the low end of it, but I'll give it a 3. The villain and the henchman. So it's Scaramanga and Knick-Knack. I guess high fat, kind of. But yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Christopher Lee is going to get... The problem is not Christopher Lee, but it's just what they do with him. So he's a 3. He elevates it to a 3. High fat is nothing to me in this. I mean, it's just it doesn't do anything for me. He's one.
He's not needed.
Yeah, he's a one to me. So yeah, that's how it goes, I think. And then if you want to put Hervé Villechaize in there, he's a one for me. He's too annoying for me. I understand that he's got. I mean, you can find him endearing or you can find him annoying.
Yeah,
and I just found him
that's
annoying.
all it is. I think he's just got some natural charm to him, but the character is like just really annoying. It makes no sense why Scaramanga has anything to do with him. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm on the lower end of a 3 here too, just because of Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee, though, I will say this is not the worst film I've ever seen with him in it. He is in this movie. It was the first sequel to The Howling. Mm-hmm. It's called The Howling 2. Your Sister is a Werewolf. Mm-hmm. It's one of the worst things you'll ever watch. I don't recommend it, but I know there's some I think there's like an interview with Lee talking about it. You could probably just type in Christopher Lee talks about Howling 2, and you might be able to find it on YouTube, but I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was pretty funny. The gadgets and the gizmos, there's nothing here, unless you're going to count like the plane and stuff, which I don't. So I don't even, I almost feel like this should just get like a not applicable.
Yeah.
I think we finally get into some gadgets in Spy Who Loved Me, but I'm probably wrong. Because, okay, we have not talked about this song yet. Okay, so this is performed by Lulu.
Yeah.
Who I know really nothing about other than she did this song. And I'm sure she's done a lot of great things. I don't know. What do you think of the song?
Oh, this song sucks. This is not a good, this doesn't fit with anything that Bond has done. And the only thing that I can tell you is that it is somewhat catchy.
It is.
As someone once told me, so is a cold.
Yes.
So,
yes.
But it's a bit catchy, but I don't like it when movies that have these mysterious, beautiful songs like Bond is known for get into this almost comedy-esque, the man with the golden gun. I don't like that type of stuff. It doesn't get me in the mood to see this big action picture, so I didn't really like it at all.
There's a Game of Thrones season 8 episode we send on Cinemasins. I don't remember which episode it is, but when Lannister, when he shows up, is it Jaime Lannister? Is that the blonde? Mm-hmm. Okay. When he shows up, he's got like a prosthetic hand now, and it's gold. So there's this part where somebody asked a question. I don't remember what the question was, but then I just had Aaron come in and say, he's the man with the golden hand. And I'm just saying, hearing Aaron Dicer singing that was beautiful.
Yeah.
Because the song's not good. It is catchy. I think Lulu performs it the way they wanted it to. I just think it's another one, kind of like Diamonds Are Forever, that just comes off as like Goldfinger light. Like they were kind of going for that feel, but then like you said, it almost turns into like a parody. Like it's almost like Weird Al singing Spy Hard, at the beginning of that Leslie Nielsen movie, which I highly recommend looking up. I wouldn't watch that movie, but the opening credits thing is pretty funny. But yeah, no, what did you say? A 2? Is that or
no?
1?
This is a 1. It's a 1 easily.
I'll give but it is catchy. I don't know. It's somewhere between a 1 and a 2 for me. It's definitely not good. It gets stuck in your head though. Like Diamonds Are Forever, I forget as soon as I'm done watching that movie. Like Man with a Golden Gun will stay in my head for a week.
Yeah.
But anyways, yes. So those are our thoughts overall on the movie. We have one more segment. It is called The Spy Who Reads Me.
Reading is one of my very favorite things to do.
Whoa! I'm not reading that crap. Summarize it in one word.
Now you want to talk about reading? Let's talk about reading.
How can you read this? There's no pictures.
Cinemasins might have taught you that the book doesn't matter, but for this segment, we're willing to concede it at least kind of does. We're going to give you the nitty-gritty on what is similar to what you saw on the screen, what is different, and there will be plenty of what the hell was Ian Fleming smoking when he wrote this. This is Ian Fleming's last novel. This was I didn't write the number. I think it's the 13th novel, but it's the final novel. There are a couple of short story collections released after this, and there has also been a bunch of Bond books written since then by various other authors. So actually, one of the things I had, Goodheart is actually in a few of the novels.
Good Night.
God damn it. Yeah, it's like, I really want to put a heart somewhere in there, like either in her last name. Good Night is in, what were the other two? I think I wrote this down. She was in On Her Majesty's Secret Service and You Only Live Twice. She also pops up, Jeffrey Deaver, who's a mystery thriller. He wrote The Bone Collector, which is what that movie was based on. He wrote a James Bond novel called Carte Blanche, and that was her last appearance as of today. Like she hasn't been in any other novels, but she's been in a few. But this was his last book. It was released in 1965 posthumously. He actually died after delivering his first draft. And reportedly, he wasn't happy with it. So I don't know if there's stuff he would have changed. This really wasn't that bad of a book, though. Like it's kind of like the movie where there's not a lot to it, but the Scaramanga stuff is still kind of fun to read, especially if you picture Christopher Lee. If they had just filmed this the way it was, I think it would have been better. But it's still not. It's not a great book. The novel is set in Jamaica. I think it's pretty clear. They just didn't want to do another Jamaica type setting or Caribbean setting. So I totally get that. And then with the popularity of martial arts films and all this stuff they were trying to, so they ended up deciding to use the Far East in the movie, but the novel actually takes place in Jamaica. Scaramanga is, I don't know if you'd say he's more just like he's trying to start a criminal empire. Like he's doing things with like drug smuggling. He's got prostitution rings, stuff like that. The weird big thing he's trying to do, which is totally ripping off Goldfinger, but instead of trying to devalue the value of gold, he's trying to devalue the value of sugar so he can jack up the prices, because that's obviously a hot commodity in places like Jamaica, is like the sugar cane and whatnot. So that's kind of what he's doing in this. You Only Live Twice, which is the novel that came before this, that ended on a cliffhanger where Bond was in Russia investigating a crisis, and then something happens, and then you don't really know what's happening next. This one opens up with Bond has been brainwashed by the Russians and has been sent to kill M. And he almost, I don't know if he almost does it, but once he gets there to kill M, they figure out that he's been brainwashed, and it's kind of like how he gets over his wife's death so quickly in the movies. Like all of a sudden he's fine. And Elm's like, I'm going to send you on a mission so you're not bored sitting at home. Like none of it makes any sense. It's like, this guy almost killed you and could still be brainwashed a little bit. It's, I don't know. It's like Fleming had a great idea, but then he just didn't know what to do with it. So he just kind of threw it under the rug. A lot of characters aren't in the book. Knick-Knack is not in the book. Scaramanga has a group of criminals, but there's no one that's like specifically like his henchman or anything. And there's no one described like Knick-Knack. J.W. Pepper's, not surprisingly, not in it. Hip's not in it because it's not set in the Far East anymore. And Andrea Anders, the Maude Adams character, is also not in the book. One character that is in the book that is left out of the movie is Felix Leiter. He shows up towards the end of the novel for the climax. Scaramanga is still an assassin, like I said, but like I already said, he's at this point, he's trying to start a criminal empire at this point. So he's not doing that as much. His backstory is about the same. He is Spanish, or he has Spanish descent. And the book also implies pretty strongly that he's gay. So that's something they obviously didn't include in the movie, which is kind of interesting, I guess, because they created that Maude Adams character. But it's not like they were scared to do that, as we saw in Diamonds Are Forever. So yeah, I kind of wish they had done that. Maybe even made like him and Hervé a couple.
Well, and considering that they were worried about making the bad guys black in the last movie, and maybe they got some flack for that, and they may have gotten some flack for making bad guys gay in the other one. Maybe they just wanted to avoid that kind of thing where like, oh, well, I guess every gay guy and every black person is bad, huh? They just wanted to kind of avoid that. So
that's a good point. And I will say the novel never just comes right. Like there's not like it's not like a gay sex scene or anything in the novel, right? But it's just, it's pretty clear that he is. I mean, and people are suggesting that they think he is and all that kind of stuff. So it definitely doesn't stray away from it. But it's also written by Fleming, who has interesting opinions about things. So sometimes you don't know if he's just being a dick or if he's actually trying to do something interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot else to it. This is the other thing that was funny. Bond ends up working as Scaramanga's personal assistant for a bit. I don't know if you remember this, but that was the thing in Goldfinger in the novel where when he decided to save Bond from the laser, he decided Goldfinger made him his personal secretary for a while.
Mm-hmm.
That felt kind of similar in this, although Bond is kind of more undercover in this. But there is a duel at the end, but it's a little different. It's more like a straight up duel, and Scaramanga gets shot, but he runs off into the forest or whatever in Jamaica, or the swamp. He runs off into like the swamp area, and Bond follows them. There's no giant squid, unfortunately.
Damn.
But I know. But they just shoot each other, and Bond just survives his bullet, and Scaramanga doesn't. So there's not a lot to it. The one funny thing, though, and I think based on your love of the actress who plays Goodnight, Bond declines the chance to get knighted because he would rather hang back and have sex with Goodnight. And the novel pretty much just comes right out and says that. But yeah, that's I almost said The Spy Who Loves Me. That's The Man with the Golden Gun. Also, before we go, we have social media. You can reach us on Twitter. We are at GoldSpy007. You can also reach out to me directly on Twitter. I am at SamLoomis13. You can email us at golddiamonddeath007@gmail.com. And if you like this podcast and other things under the Cinemasins brand, we also have a Patreon you can join at patreon.com/Cinemasins. And if you have a second to leave us a 5-star review at your podcast listening app of choice, we would appreciate it. Thank you all for joining us this week. We hope you will join us again next week. We will talk about The Spy Who Loved Me. Until then, keep the martinis dry and shaken, the Baccarat shoe moving, and the Aston Martin fully gassed. This is Chris Atkinson and Jonathan Watkins signing off, and we will see you next mission.